Welcome to my world history notes where I discuss things I'm learning about world history that I'm studying. And I hope that you'll be interested in some of them and look for yourself and come to your own conclusions, but that you'll at least know about these things. So I'm digging into the world after World War II, starting with the last year of the war and going over events and then trying to dig a little deeper. And it's just, there's so much you can do, so much you can learn. And I'm not going to get as deep as I'd like to, but I do want to cover this. So today I'm going to start with Alger Hiss, who's a government official whose role at the upcoming very important Yalta conference, which is going to be a hinge point to begin my talk on the Cold War. He's not too specific, but worth looking into. So first, the Dumbarton Oaks Conference was discussions that took place in the fall of 1944 at the Dumbarton Oaks Estate in Washington, D.C. It was here that the Allied nations agreed on the title United Nations, according to William L. Newman's book, After Victory, Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin, and the Making of the Peace. Here, the quote, four policemen, as Roosevelt called them, the United Kingdom, which is Great Britain, the USA, Soviet Union, and nationalist China, joined by France, excuse me, were to have a permanent seat on the Security Council, a Security Council, in which six small powers would be elected for 2-year terms. Each of the big powers had the ability to veto whatever the body of the UN proposed. Now, this is the discussion they were having. The Soviet Union wanted 16 governmental entities, as the Soviet Union was really an empire, to be seated. But, of course, this would have been an obvious and immediate capitulation of power to their global designs and control over the United Nations. Now, my point today, an interesting character at this point is Alger Hiss, who I mentioned at the beginning. Starting out as a government attorney during FDR's leftist New Deal program, he eventually rose to a position of Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on International Organization, and then the director of the State Department's Office of Special Political Affairs. He would then go on to become president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, former communist Whittaker Chambers would accuse him of having been a fellow communist committing espionage for the Soviet Union. Hiss would later be charged with perjury and convicted after a second trial in 1950. In spite of the evidence indicating that Hiss had been a Soviet agent, because he authored a memorandum at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference that seemed to go against Stalin's wishes and Hiss's recommendation that the 16 Soviet, quote, republics in the Soviet Empire not each be given membership in the United Nations. This is often used as evidence that Hiss was not a Soviet agent. However, scholar Henry D. Fetter, in an article posted in the Journal of Cold War Studies entitled Alger Hiss at Yalta, a reassessment, excuse me, of Hiss's arguments against including any of the Soviet republics as initial UN members. He notes that this clever memorandum did support Stalin's aim to keep countries that had not been signatory to the 1942 Declaration of the United Nations or did not have their own ability to create a foreign policy from being voting members of the United Nations. This memorandum, if it had been accepted, would have done worse damage to the desire of FDR and Churchill to have America's Latin American allies or British India be allowed to join the United Nations, according to Fetter. In the end, Stalin got the Soviet Union, the Ukraine, and Belarusia. So here we have an important and influential, if not top ranking government official with a lot of evidence to suggest he was a Soviet agent, likely working for Stalin's interest in the formation of the United Nations. This will be a brick in the wall of the edifice that would dominate so many events that would come later in places from Korea to Southern Africa and elsewhere. Now, let's get back to some events leading up to the Yalta Conference. Hungary, if you remember, up to the end of World War I, that had been a large empire we called Austria-Hungary, had been led by an anti-communist dictator, in fact, if not in name, Miklos Horthy, who allied Hungary with Nazi Germany. Hungarian troops participated in Hitler's campaign against Soviet Russia. Beginning in 1942, Hungary made overtures to the Western Allies that they would be willing to switch sides if Allied troops reached their border in order to keep them free from either German or Soviet domination. When Hitler learned about this, he demanded Hungary's full allegiance or they would face German occupation. As a result, leftist parties were persecuted and thousands of Jews oppressed and deported to Auschwitz. 550,000 out of Hungary's 750,000 Jews would die. When the Soviet Russians came through and set up a communist pro-Soviet provisional government, Hungary declared war on Germany, and then in January signed an armistice with the Allied powers. Elie Wiesel, in his memoirs, was a Jew who suffered at Auschwitz, and he says they were carried off to go to the camps. They could hear artillery in the distance. They could hear fighting in the distance. So next, we're going to interject some cultural history from American cultural history, and some things that are interesting as far as getting ready for the Cold War. I do want to discuss like FDR's relationship with the oil-producing nations, particularly Saudi Arabia, and some other things that will be important later. So I thank you for listening, and I hope that even if you disagree with something or think I made a misstatement of fact, that will cause you to dig and look and study, and that's what I'd like to see happen. Is more people just start knowing about things, or being interested in these historical events that put us where we are today, possibly on the cusp of a world war again. All right, thank you very much, and have a great day.